Everyone laughs. And so, per cause and effect, the anti-organic equation is at it again. Well, Aha certainly does laugh on Planarcadia, which certainly clarifies quite a few things about Andatur Zazzalo's history in Gold and Gears, the Herald of Death, and the status of Evanescia in Planarcadia. For a bit of a recap, Andatur Zazzalo was a masked fool who followed Rupert II around before he became Rupert II. Rupert II was very fond of Andatur Zazzalo, wanting to save him from his predestined death calculated by Nous, but for some reasons, he also simultaneously had troubles remembering who Andatur Zazzalo was, and the masked fool also did not appear in the record of Simulated Universe. My name is Andatur Zazzalo, and I'm from Golconda 7, where the people believe in the masked fools. The Intellitron raises its arm to shield you from the rain. I'll be your company for the rest of your journey. Now, please choose your type of intracognition. What kind of machine are you? Am I capable of saving Andatur Zazzalo? Andatur Zazzalo. It seems to have accompanied you many times, but you never notice it. No matter who it is, its name is never known by the simulated universe. However, its death will be inevitable, as calculated by Nous. There is a large coffin in front of you. A masked fool is leaning its back on it while giving a speech. The fool introduces himself as Andatur Zazzalo, and the person lying inside the coffin bears the same name. Soon, you realize Andatur Zazzalo will perish in this war. The one with whom you have crossed paths several times, but never gave much attention to. I can save it. Let me think of a way. I can't save it. Is he your companion? You contemplate who can counter the calculation of the erudition. It can be the Enigmata or the Remembrance, but nothing is guaranteed. In your journey ahead, there will be numerous masked fools who claim to be Andatur Zazzalo. They just want to cheer you up, but you'll only be left feeling melancholic. There is one who will die for you, and one to whom you will perish. A strange thought creeps into your mind out of nowhere. In hindsight, it was really obvious that the force that can counter the calculation of the erudition in this specific case is the Elation, and also a bit of good old foolery. From Amphorius, we know that both the Enigmata and the Remembrance can also counter the erudition to a certain extent, as seen when Cyrene could infinitely delay Irontomb's birth with her eternal recurrence. However, in this specific case, because Andatur Zazzalo is from an Elation planet and literally a masked fool, I think it's quite fair to say that the specific force that counters the erudition behind Andatur Zazzalo is the Elation, albeit also with some components of the Enigmata, if Pearl is correct in her assessment that the creation of Imagini also involves mythos. For the specific of how Aha works, you can check this video for more details, but the short gist is that Sparkle is Aha, Sparksy is Aha, Sampo is Aha, Assad is Aha, and everyone is Aha. Fundamentally, Aha operates as an anime character, a collective consciousness of anyone who laughs, an imaginary friend of all the Elation Pathstriders, and basically a really big yokai controlling all the masks. Because of this detail about Aha, things have become much clearer as to who will die for you. There is one who will die for you, and one to whom you will perish is yourself. The one to whom you will perish is Polka Kakamon, most likely a future Rupert down the line traveling back in time, and the one who will die for you is Andatur Zazzalo, the imaginary friend of Rupert II controlled by the Master of Elation, and therefore, also himself. Hence, this is why it seems to have accompanied you many times, but you never notice it. No matter who it is, its name is never known by the simulated universe. However, its death will be inevitable, as calculated by Nous, because Andatur Zazzalo is literally Rupert II, whose death was calculated by Nous. As a result, the fool introduces himself as Andatur Zazzalo, and the person lying inside the coffin bears the same name, because the actual person running the body is alive, and the person inside the coffin is the imaginary friend named Andatur Zazzalo. And because all of the masked fools' imaginary friend is Aha, other masked fools kept popping up claiming themselves to be Andatur Zazzalo, because all of them are technically Aha. In Planarcadia, we actually have a similar case that heavily mirrors the situation of Rupert II and Andatur Zazzalo. In Fulwish's medical record, it was revealed that she was a survivor of the Phantasmon game 15 years ago. As a result, she had a severe case of post-traumatic stress disorder. However, there was something more to her. In her implant site of synesthesia beacon, there was a minor tissue growth, and this growth turned out to be a yokai in her brain. While the doctors at the time did not connect the dots, Fulwish believed that this yokai in her brain is Aha, and later created an organization pushing people to get a lobotomy so that they would also get this miniature Aha in their brain like she does. With the miniature Aha in their brains, she could describe the desires of others in a telepathic way, but she also experienced intense hallucination and lost all rationality whenever she tried to describe her own pain. They called this affliction the happiness grammar. Of course, with how Aha works, that tumor yokai is likely literally Aha. Her case is extremely similar to Rupert II, whose imaginary friend inside his brain is Andatur Zazzalo. Furthermore, if this connection holds, then we can also use Fulwish's case to explore the possible cause for Rupert II to develop an imaginary friend called Andatur Zazzalo in the first place the very moment he set foot on Machine Empire. The cause is likely a wonky interaction between the anti-organic equation and the synesthesia beacon inside their brains, enabling the elation to manifest as a yokai to counter the spread of the anti-organic equation. Incidentally, the synesthesia beacon was originally created by Elias Salas, a Genius Society member at the very start of Gold and Gears. It was supposed to be a brain implant that helped people translate between all languages, and as a result of this development, the Garden's memory bubble tech was pushed aside from development, and it just so happened that there was actually a pure child active at the time, likely on the Garden side. She was the long-haired woman that Dwayne ran into when he got close to the cast iron throne, and she was seen sleeping, as if she was dead for a long time. More importantly, she was also associated with the sound of a wind chime when Polka showed up, the same association with wind chime that Cyrene also had when she walked backward to the past and retroactively caused key events to happen as Fully. In addition, the scene before that was extremely similar to our meeting with Nous in 3.7 during the Irontomb fight. Also, it was reported that a Fully appeared before Louis Fleming when he was finally pushed out of power by Dongfang Qixing. So yeah, that woman is highly likely to be a pure child on Louis Fleming's faction, having walked back to the past to meet Louis Fleming at that very moment. Extrapolating from this, we can go back even further to explain another key event that the pure child walking back into the past failed to prevent: the development of the synesthesia beacon by Elias Salas and the IPC. In the databank, Elias Salas left this note on the technology. The thought processes of intelligent creatures are mostly represented via inner language, just like how people would subconsciously read to themselves when looking at words and form thoughts that way. If we can skip that step of information transmission and instead link up our consciousness, convert the codes of our inner language, then let the receiver's language processing system analyze and restore that information, then we will have no barriers in communication. That was how Elias Salas created the first pair of synesthesia beacon prototypes. Regrettably, language was not the only communication barrier between geniuses. There was also arrogance. The members of the society ignored his invention, and this brilliant piece of engineering marvel was forgotten for centuries. However, the invisible restrictions of language continued to frustrate the Interastral Peace Corporation. They issued an irrefutable ultimatum to the Intelligentsia Guild, which they themselves funded. The scholars modified and labored amongst ancient manuscripts and finally recreated the synesthesia beacons. The age of interstellar communication finally began. Nowadays, the synesthesia beacon is the fundamental technology of all intelligent life forms in the cosmos. With just one injection that embeds the beacon in your central nervous system, you would be able to understand an alien language from the furthest star as if it was your native tongue. Unfortunately, the cosmos did not become peaceful with a universal language. On the contrary, there were even more conflicts. When people could understand each other's language, but had very diverse standards in life, countless fights started to erupt between groups with different outlooks. Parties sought to surpass each other, and races eagerly planned to hunt each other down. Neither Elias Salas nor the Intelligentsia Guild had predicted this outcome. So in short, the synesthesia beacon is actually a telepathic device, broadcasting all thoughts to the other wearers as a form of communication, and it was this telepathic ability of the beacon that allowed Fulwish to perceive the happiness of other people. However, with the events of Gold and Gears, we can safely say that it was also the medium through which the bad thoughts of the inorganic equation were spread from the original version held by Rupert I. And because the pure child walking back in time failed to prevent the IPC from developing the technology from Elias blueprints, the beacon was implanted into literally everyone, organic included. As such, with the beacon as the medium, the anti-organic equation could then cross the inorganic-organic barrier to specifically infect the synesthesia beacon inside the organic, which eventually led to the infection and rise of Rupert II. In a similar vein, during Scholar's Strife, the anti-organic virus created by an accident is quickly spreading across the species barrier in the School of Evolutionary Perfection's comms network using magnetic waves as its carrier, as if heralding the horrific prophecy of Rupert III's arrival. In other words, the synesthesia beacon, much like the communication network of the School of Evolutionary Perfection, is likely to be another medium that the anti-organic equation can spread. Effectively, the beacon being a creation of the erudition likely puts everyone with that implant under the control of Nous. Or, in the words of the Candelagraph historians during Scholar's Strife, resisting destiny, a destructive behavior with the goal of ascertaining the future. If resisting destiny is in itself a part of destiny, in the face of erudition, is free will also not just a lie of self-delusion? Is the future certain, or is it chaotic? If a perfect universal model is divined, mayhaps even the future can be confined within the circle of knowledge. As such, it was not for no reason that the Enigmata followers in the School of Relative Cognition started a boycott against the synesthesia beacon during the Scholar's Strife. Each civilization is like a unique musical instrument, and their own recognition of the universe around them emits a unique tone. But the synesthesia beacon is like a devil that whispers in your ear, silencing all of these sounds and allowing for only one tone that we glorify as knowledge. What's more terrifying is that we cannot discern how much static of human interference exists between these tones. We have a duty to abolish the synesthesia beacon and hear each other's voices directly. We must allow relative cognition to replace ultimate knowledge. The synesthesia beacon controls all that we hear. The Intelligentsia Guild members are all liars. They have lost trust in everyone. At the end, the scepter destroyed the synesthesia beacons active in the entire quadrant. You have once again returned to a time without deceit. Inside the gibberish that spreads among the stars, the Candelagraphos caught the scent of riddles, but they could not tell if even the records themselves had been tainted by Enigmata. Well, to be fair, while the boycott had severe side effects such as getting that professor fired and driving him mad, it likely slowed down the spread of the anti-organic equation accidentally created by the School of Evolutionary Perfection, which likely allowed Batavia and Herta to dodge the bullet. Batavia managed to trace back to Nous' location and left behind the solitary wave theory, which was later solved by Herta. And because Batavia did not catch the anti-organic equation, Herta, who was studying Batavia's theory, managed to not instantly become Rupert III right then and there. Because of the Enigmata's boycott of the synesthesia beacon, Herta's fate in accordance to Nous' fourth instant was delayed until unknowable domain, when it was delayed once more by Aha countering Polka. But that was not all that Aha had done to interfere with the spread of the anti-organic equation through the synesthesia beacon. Mythos. I saw their trace. And Aha's laughter. It could be bogus, since they were unscrupulous. The radiance of Huo was also captured by the simulated universe. They would not stand by and do nothing as the war raged on. However, the moments calculated by Nous did come true one after another as though no forces had interfered with them. Perhaps some Ians did or did not attempt to do so. Now, with Fulwish case, we can safely conclude that it actually has another effect. The synesthesia beacon can also give people a tumor yokai, and this tumor causes them to develop Aha in their brain, the happiness grammar. Thus, when Rupert II arrived at the Machine Empire under the order of the IPC, his synesthesia beacon also underwent the same process of Fulwish. Instead of succumbing to the anti-organic equation, the synesthesia beacon gave him Andatur Zazzalo, a part of his psyche that was under the control of Aha. Thus, it seems to have accompanied you many times, but you never notice it. No matter who it is, its name is never known by the simulated universe. However, its death will be inevitable, as calculated by Nous. Is he your companion? You contemplate who can counter the calculation of the erudition. It can be the Enigmata or the Remembrance, but nothing is guaranteed. There is one who will die for you, and one to whom you will perish. Of course, just as Herta has stated in Amphorius, Nous Instant is actually a chain of events, a Swiss cheese configuration theory involving many different hoops. Just because you counter one specific hoop of Nous doesn't mean that you have countered all of them. In Amphorius, at the end of the chain of events is the predetermined fourth instant, and back in Gold and Gears, the same event happened to Rupert II and Andatur Zazzalo. As foretold by Nous, eventually, the imaginary friend Andatur Zazzalo was killed by Rupert II as he succumbed to the anti-organic equation and became the second emperor during the 3 chapters of God's 3 revelations. The Intelligentsia Guild believed the 3 revelations would lead to an equation. Am I capable of saving Andatur Zazzalo? Andatur Zazzalo. Who's that? It seems to have accompanied you many times, but you never notice it. No matter who it is, its name is never known by the simulated universe. However, its death will be inevitable, as calculated by Nous. By placing all resources and lives in the universe on 2 sides of the equation, I'm infinitely close to deriving the logic of the anti-organic equation. As a result, poverty, wealth, violence, and power are created during the process. At the same time, pain and happiness are produced. It's difficult to distinguish between the 2 variables. I have tried severing the link between them for 4,328 times, and I failed every time. You cannot stop the anti-organic equation. You can only watch it run. The war was brought to an end later. Survivors, both organic and inorganic, returned to a long-awaited peaceful life. Yet, most of them spent the rest of their life in destitution and trauma. Equal pain returned to their dreams on countless nights. Sometimes, they were as dim as candlelights. Other times, they jumped out and almost took on a human form, turning into a mysterious creature. Those mysterious candlelights weaved around within their bones and blood vessels. They could feel their blood filling with venom that was being transferred to their limbs, hearts, and brains. There is a large coffin in front of you. A masked fool is leaning its back on it while giving a speech. The fool introduces himself as Andatur Zazzalo, and the person lying inside the coffin bears the same name. Soon, you realize Andatur Zazzalo will perish in this war. The one with whom you have crossed paths several times, but never gave much attention to. I can save it. Let me think of a way. I can't save it. There is one who will die for you, and one to whom you will perish. A strange thought creeps into your mind out of nowhere. In other words, Planarcadia is actually a parallel of Gold and Gears, in the same way Penacony was for Swarm Disaster and Amphorius was for both of these events. Specifically, the Irontomb in Amphorius was the equivalent to Rupert I, as Herta rose to become Rupert III in the Exotale. Of course, there have always been multiple versions of the anti-organic equation, and Irontomb in Amphorius was just a specific version of it injected into the scepter by Ligus. Naturally, following the events of Gold and Gears, we are in the transitional phase between Rupert III and IV, with the Planarcadia plot being the parallel to Rupert II and the masked fool Andatur Zazzalo. Suspiciously enough, back in Amphorius, Asap Pramid specifically said this about Irontomb.
So, what's the point in this process? Just for it to feel like a ceremony? Well, it's not like I have a right to complain about ceremonies. I mourn for worlds that can no longer laugh.
The procession he was talking about is obviously the Phantasmon game, as you can see with the literal moon in that frame. Later on, in 3.7, he also canonically arrived at Amphorius and specifically criticized Amphorius to be too verbose before saying that with my sense of aesthetics, work should be wrapped up quickly and surely. While tens of thousands may mourn, only I can't laugh. It is pretty obvious by now that by work, he meant Planarcadia. If you pay attention to the trailer, you can see that the Irontomb here is suspiciously white, unlike the black version we saw in the Fables video and boss fight. And, well, Irontomb was somehow included in Pearl's report of possible threats even though we supposedly already defeated it in Amphorius, while Irontomb actually killed a Kivali in the Nihilix video before we pressed the reset button. So yeah, everyone laughs, and the antiorganic equation is at it again. As of right now, my guess is that after 3.7, we did actually crash in Planarcadia and got wiped by Irontomb before we pressed the reset button, which led to 4.0, but our memories were lost as a result. In other words, there's been a stealth change in point of view, much like 2.3, the plot twist of which was conveniently revealed right before Planarcadia, and we are missing a portion of our memories. Basically, Planarcadia is a cat box right now. For the more specific details on the cat box and how the parallax truth of the Elation steps on the toes of the erudition's objective truth, you can check out my Elation video. Also in the same video, I highlighted a sat pyramid is likely to be the culprit who created the Herald, and how the Herald is actually a mimetic entity, a mask posing multiple different people, much like the Sparksy virus that Sparkle hinted to us. And much like Tatari from Melty Blood, whose true nature is also that of an equation trying to complete its calculation. Well, right after I posted that video, the live stream and trailer further back up that theory. In a flashing frame, we were shown that the Herald is actually multiple moon masks possessing multiple people. The live stream later clarifies that these are members of Fulwish lobotomy organization, the one that pushes for people to cut off a part of their brains to create a miniature aha in their head and mimic Fulwish happiness grammar. Now, after a long review of Andatur Zazzalo's story and a review of Fulwish medical record, we can tentatively put forward the hypothesis that Fulwish happiness grammar is actually a parallel of Andatur Zazzalo for Rubert II, as a reaction of the synesthesia beacon and the elation power in the present of the antiorganic equation, turning nihility into jokes in an effort to balance an equation that will never balance out. It just so happens that Fulwish was actually a survivor of the Herald from 15 years ago. In other words, she caught the antiorganic equation 15 years ago, and her situation is pretty much the same as Rubert II, with the equivalent of Andatur Zazzalo in her head delaying the antiorganic equation with a happiness grammar. She's a ticking Irontomb. But worse than that, since then, Fulwish has gone on to establish the Research Society of Happy Smiles, encouraging people to get the same happiness grammar, inadvertently spreading the antiorganic equation to everyone else in the same organization, turning everyone else in the organization into ticking Irontomb. Or, as Ashvale suggested in the live stream, the Happy Smiles Society is the victim pool for the Herald to draw from, as are the various rebelling mecha we saw in the trailer. After all, the Herald infecting them is just another form of the antiorganic equation, the next hoop in the fourth instant predicted by Nous. In addition to the Sparksy virus, Sparkle had the humor to remind us of an Elation version of Ligus, Xander 2, or, to be more precise, Irontomb version 2.0.
我并非您熟知的神力观众，而是假面愚者赞达尔2桑原。这一次，我选择走上欢愉，以我的幽默感击破国师尊。
Actually, from a meta perspective, if we connect this back to Sakura Samsara in Honkai Impact 3 and Amphorius, we can have an even more solid lead back to the antiorganic equation too. As the plot of Elysian Realm and Moon Arc from Honkai 3 were translated to Amphorius, the Herrscher of Corruption of the current era, the antagonist representing the nihility of the Enlightenment movement, became the antiorganic equation. However, in Honkai 3, there were actually two different Herrscher of Corruption, and the previous Herrscher of Corruption landed in Yairen, who became Higo Kumaru in Sakura Samsara, whose equivalent in Planarcadia is very obviously the pink fox summoned by Evanescia. And yeah, that's where our second Irontomb is. To be more specific, Honkai 3 has a bit of a continuity error between the Gun Girl Z lore, Sakura Samsara, and Elysian Realm. This is because the three stories were written by different people, and some retcon has happened over the years. Hoyo has been hand-waving all the differences away as parallel worlds the same way Nasu does the same for Type Moon lore, so there is a bit of a debate as to which series is canon and which is not. However, the canon status of these installments are irrelevant to the discussion, as the writers can pull and remix any of these ideas for a new installment in Star Rail. Anyway, the general gist is that in Impact 3, the previous era Herrscher of Corruption was Yairen, the sister of Sakura. She was jailed and mistreated just for her status as a Herrscher, which led to her breakout and her physical death before she was sealed in a black box. So technically, the previous era Herrscher of Corruption stuck around inside the box until the current era. In the current era, Yae Rin was sacrificed once again to appease the god, although the current era Rin wasn't a Herrscher this time. Instead, it was just the old one popping up once more when Colin carried the black box to the Yae village, but the black box was cracked and the previous Herrscher of Corruption leaked out to possess Yae Sakura, the current era version of her sister. Yae Sakura then was sealed back into a black box until the events of the Gratitude Arc and Sakura Samsara. In the artificial stigma space, Yae Sakura managed to win a simulated happy ending with her girlfriend and sister. She also woke up Higokumuru, the previous era Yae Rin, and helped her regain her sanity. Well, that's a lot of words, but the short gist is that even if there are conflicting theories as to whether Evanescia is supposed to be a Sakura face or a Rin face between the two sisters, what is very, very certain is that this fox is supposed to be the same as that fox. In other words, the big fox here in the splash art is the equivalent of Higokumuru, the Herrscher of Corruption, and the incarnation of the anti-organic equation, sealed inside the cat box of Planarcadia.
如果有机会让世界科技进步100年，却要牺牲一只小猫咪，你愿意吗？哇哦，很冷酷嘛！恭喜你，你和这个世界选择了一样的回答。
This line talks about the classroom from 15 years ago and the general theme of Planarcadia, but I would personally be surprised if it doesn't also apply to Evanescia, as the eternal high school student reappearing every game as a ghost with a fox summon. After all, whether it's Sakura or Rin, they both have the sacrificial fox in the box plot, albeit it's a fox box rather than a cat box like Scodinger's experiment. Incidentally, in Gun Girl Z, Yae Sakura is actually a ghost kept alive by the fox Higokumuru for 500 years. She was originally a warrior who went to kill the fox, but the fox fell in love with her, and after 500 years, she fell in love with her as well. So here, the fox and Yae Sakura are lovers and not sisters. But what's more important here is that for Planarcadia, the writers have likely mixed all of these versions of the story together. The fox being the anti-organic equation in the black box, and regardless of whether they're lovers or sisters, Evanescia, whose Chinese name means red flower, is most definitely the moon in the water, flower in the mirror, a ghost kept alive all these years inside the black box of Planarcadia. In Japanese legend, foxes can be good or evil. The evil one is historically inspired by the nine-tailed fox from Chinese mythologies, and the good one is the native god Inari, who is closely affiliated to the myth of Amaterasu, the sun god of the Japanese pantheon. Hokusai, the artist who painted the Great Wave off Kanagawa and the historical inspiration for Graphia, actually went the extra mile and connected all of these evil fox figures to Daji from Chinese history. In his version of the story, the fox first possessed Daji before escaping to Japan as Tamamo no Maya, who caused the emperor illness and was sealed in a stone. Incidentally, that stone just broke in 2022, so technically you can argue that Tamamo has escaped at last. Anyway, this nine-tailed fox spirit also has an additional connection to divinity. In China, investiture of the gods claimed that she was a servant of the goddess Niwa, sent to the mortal world to punish bad kings and enforce the mandate of heaven. In modern-day Japan, the Fate franchise tied all of the different versions of the nine-tailed fox together, with Tamamo and Ajit being different tales of Amaterasu, the Japanese sun goddess affiliated with the fox god Inari. So you can see that in the first place, there has always been a division between the good fox Inari and the bad fox imported from Chinese mythologies, but much like the concept of yin-yang, inside good, there is evil, and inside evil, there is good. You can see Hoyo's application of this with Higokumuru backstory in Impact 3, as she was ultimately Yae Rin, the sacrificial victim for the sake of the people around her, and even as a precursor, the Gun Girl Z version of the fox has both hatred and love, enough to maintain Yae Sakura's ghost long after her death. Regardless of which version Hoyo is remixing from for Evanescia, we can reasonably expect a similar theme of good and evil side by side for her and her fox summon. As in, the fox is probably the anti-organic equation, and Evanescia is probably an imaginee created after the form of the original girl who was sacrificed long ago, correlating to the evil and the good inside the same being, the anti-organic equation. Although, the original girl was probably an Enigmata or a Remembrance pure child walking back in time to change the anti-organic equation, judging by her obvious resemblance to Cyrene and the presence of a pure child in gold and gears playing the exact same role. Speaking of Cyrene, in Amphoreus, she also has the exact same theme of the true moon hidden in the water, as I have noted back in 3.6, and Evanescia also has that same imagery in the trailer. As you can see here, her reflection in the water is literally the moon, which serves as an interesting connection to her fox, who is obviously based on Inari and Amaterasu. As a sun god, Amaterasu is the ruling god in the Japanese pantheon. She is heavily connected to fox spirits, Inari, and agriculture, as mentioned above. However, she does have her detractors, her brothers Tsukuyomi, the moon god, and Susanoo, the storm god. Specifically, Tsukuyomi killed the food goddess Ukamochi, who is either the wife of Inari or Inari herself. As a result, Amaterasu was mad enough at him that she banished him from appearing before her, causing the split between day and night. As a moon god, Tsukuyomi is associated with the new moon, the tides, and occasionally in modern media, with illusions and lunacy, as you can see with the Naruto plot involving infinite Tsukuyomi that puts everyone in an eternal dream. With Evanescia being the moon in the water, we can reasonably guess that she is the Tsukuyomi of Planarcadia, and her summon, the fox based on both Amaterasu and Inari, should be the sun that was split from the moon. And well, technically, the moonlight is only a reflection of the sunlight, so that does fit with the theory that Evanescia is the moon in the water, maintained by the fox. In any case, I fully expect that the plot would eventually involve Evanescia and her fox to break the illusion of the catwalks in Planarcadia. As for Susanoo, he's probably the thunder coil that was on fire as of 4.0. Ultimately, as I have mentioned in the Elation video, the moon in Planarcadia is a wheel of fortune, the cycle of samsara transforming humans into beasts and vice versa. Interestingly, there is also a Buddhist story involving the cause and effect of a fox, the Wild Fox Koan. In the Wild Fox Koan, a monk claimed that a dedicated Buddhist follower cannot fall into cause and effect, which is another way of saying karma. For quick context, the goal of Buddhism is to fall out of cause and effect and escape the samsara cycle to reach enlightenment. As such, it was quite scandalous to claim that unenlightened Buddhist followers, even if dedicated ones, are already outside of the samsara cycle and beyond cause and effect. As a result of his claim, the monk was turned into a wild fox for 500 lifetimes. After 500 years, the fox appears to Zen master Bai Zhang and demands to be freed from his animal form. The Zen master told him not to ignore cause and effect, which caused the monk to believe that he had been released from his wild fox body. As in, the fox died and asked to be given a monk's funeral rites, ending the cause and effect chain from his past as the monk made the scandalous statement. Later, a disciple asked what would have happened had the monk not denied cause and effect. Bai Zhang tells the disciple to come close so he can answer him. The disciple steps forward and slaps Bai Zhang, ostensibly in the awareness that Bai Zhang had intended to strike him. Bai Zhang laughs approvingly and compares him to the Indian monk and Zen patriarch Bodhidharma. Well, the story is a bit hard to understand, but basically, the original monk became a fox because he got himself caught in the karmic cycle, falling into the cause and effect of the samsara. And to escape from his karmic debt as a fox, he had to pass away as a fox to finish his karmic debt and be reincarnated to the next life. In the second half, the disciple's question was rather counterfactual, much like the slap that happened based on another counterfactual prediction. Ultimately, the slap is the answer to the question, as whether the monk made the origin statement or not effectively depends on the roll of the die, but whichever side the die lands on. Cause and effect cannot be separated for too long as you're still inside the samsara, regardless of probability, regardless of choices. After all, Even with the intervention of the Garden Pure Child and the Elation, Rupert too still completed his transformation in the end, and as of right now, Nous' fourth instant has not yet been overturned. Wumun, the monk who compiled the Wild Fox Koan, gave this additional commentary. If you have an eye to see through this, then you will know that the former head of the monastery did enjoy his 500 happy blessed lives as a fox. Not falling, not ignoring, 2 sides, 1 dice. Not ignoring, not falling. Hundreds and thousands of regrets.
我又梦见了，真是个离谱的梦境，比那家伙许诺的还要夸张。看来列车又一次选择了错误的航线，但这也无可奈何啊。在光阴中，就算能将阴与果分隔良久，但二者终将发生可怕的重逢。我说的没错吧？隔着重重帷幕窥视我等的观测者。